of the three that I have planned for my week in TSU. And today, since we have discussed Papyri 2 days ago, I am going to make you dive deeper in the matter by reading some of the objects, specifically pointing to one theme. I will say it is a trendy theme nowadays. You cannot write a research project without something about gender studies. I wouldn't say this is strictly gender studies, but just me being inquisitive about certain papyri. And yet, there is a point, I believe, in investigating this matter which goes beyond the fact that the matter is particularly a la mode today, particularly the latest fad. And it's this. We all know that Greco-Roman civilization is patriarchal, like most civilization in the world, especially in the beginning. They knew it too, actually. Papinian, the famous Roman lawmaker and jurist, noted in his Quaestiones, almost incidentally, that in a lot of articles of our law, in multis juris nostri articulis, the condition of women is worse than that of males. He is not making an antagonistic or aggressive statement. He's just very politely acknowledging a fact. He notices that in the body of Roman law, often women are worse off than males when it comes to inheritance, when it comes to self-representation, when it comes to legal action. But one thing that papyri, and of course we cannot dispute that. We cannot dispute that women had the wrong end of the stick in most of the proceedings in Greco-Roman antiquity and later and before and everywhere else in the world before the last centuries. But one thing that papyri teach you is that there's a divide, there's a gap between what you get from the official sources, from literature, and what's happened in everyday life. Life in a Roman legion is one thing if you read Tacitus, or Livius, or Vegetius, and a slightly different thing when you go to the archaeological excavations and to papyri pertaining to a Roman army. Because the thing that historians and cultured people and writers can gather about the world in which they live will not always be the same as what happens when people have to face directly the challenges of everyday life. This is very true also for the condition of women. I selected mostly Latin documents for you rather than Greek ones because I was playing it safe. I have studied them for years. I know them very well. There was I was much less in danger of telling you, of making mistakes and of telling you open falsehoods. Instead, with Latin documents, I'm kind of in my own ground, which can be advantageous for me, but for you too. You rely much more on what I say in that respect. Why is this relevant? Because when we study history, yes, we like to think of general trends and terms, but we also want to see what happens in the fringes, what happens when things crack through the gaps. Exceptions are what interest us. Things that shouldn't happen, but happens anyways. So we see that, for instance, from Egypt, but not just in Egypt, Egypt had a long tradition of women agency compared to Greece and Roman law. Egyptian law is less antagonistic against women. And we find from this documentation that despite sources inform us of a worse condition, a deterior condition, you may notice that deep down there are phenomena, there are instances and occurrences of adaptability and resilience of women in their own right, and new solutions that they had to invent to face the old eternal problems of their own inferiority in front of the law. This is the documents that I'm showing you today. All are AD, all are from the Vulgar era, from Christian era. I tried to put them in a chronological order to make things safer. Most of them are papyri. 2 or 3 of them are tablets. One is an ostracon, and the first of the batch is a Pompeian graffito. before 79, of course. I like to begin from here because this is pretty much what sums up the entire PowerPoint. Virum vendere volo meum. I want to sell my own husband. Vendere actually recalls very much sell as a slave. This is generally interpreted as the graffito, the spontaneous writing of conjugal infelicity. This is an unsatisfied wife. An unsatisfied wife who can definitely write in the same way a male would do, because this is the same alphabet that every other graffito in Pompeii employs, even when the scribe is a male. Now, there's always the main problem: we were never there when the scribe of this wrote this, so yes, we assume it was a woman. But it's always safe to be, you know, wary. Yes, we may assume this was a woman, hopefully, 99%, but we never know for certain. If that was a woman, two things are interesting in that case, three actually. That they can use graffiti to vent out frustration and rage, exactly as males would do. Pompeian graffiti are full of obscenities, of insults, of obscene paintings and graffiti and drawings, etc. Secondly, that they would learn to write as their male peers at what we would call the pedagogium, the elementary school. The writing education is the same. And thirdly, that they would be subject to the same mismatches of spoken language of their male counterpart. Why meum and not meum? Probably an archaic feature of the language. We are before 79 AD. Archaism in spoken language in certain corners of the land still appears. Varro says that the elders in his own native town of Rieti still said meliosem instead of meliorem, accusative of melior, because Rotacism did not intervene in those mountains as it would intervene in the rest of Latin-speaking community. In that case, instead, a woman is featured in the document but does not speak directly. This is an ostracon from didumoi and is the letter of a pimp, a procurer, someone who sells women. Didymoi is a Roman fort in the eastern desert. They have been excavated these last 30 years by Hélène Cuvigny and Adam Boulot-Jacobsen from France. Excavations have found out tons and tons of these beautiful potsherd documents, both in Greek and sometimes in Latin, because we are in a military contest, and soldiers learned both Greek and Latin in the field, in the barracks, and they would use them sometimes, even if their home language was definitely Greek and Egyptian. The forts were vital for the Roman control of the commercial routes from the Red Sea and India and China to the Nile and then to the rest of the empire. There were also diorite caves which were excavated. The weather was unforgiving. A lot of these documents are about provisions of water. And of course, these were soldiers. And you know what happens when you put an all-male company in the ancient world in the same place for too much time? Let's go to the translations first. Cornelius to Antonius, greetings. I told you 10 times already. If you have anything to say against me, say it plainly, for you're not my creditor, and I owe you nothing. And if I choose to, I'll charge you for the days Julia was unavailable. I had to defy the entire garrison to let her go to you, for you were frying. So now, if you don't mind your own business, you might as well pay me 5 minae, but I snatch her away from you, and I hope she's well. We have to realize that the pimp can rent a girl to a soldier, but there should be a time limit, a time dimension, exceeding which the pimp starts losing money. And the pimp is particularly angry. Look at the language he's using. I've told you 10 times. This guy is actually pretty shrewd in his language. I would never have expected in an Greco-Egyptian papyri to see the word teganidzein, frying, especially a teganidzugar, which is a very Greek way of using the causal sentence, for you were frying, and in the imperfect tense. Apart from that, his orthography, I have marked you in red all the times when the orthography is a bit, squishy, like praxis, that's epsilon, but it should be et iota, eukomai, but it's definitely pronounced e. And what happens to omega and omicron, don't even get me started. Clearly he has no sense of the length of the vowel, so he doesn't really know where to put omicron and omega. It probably goes by memory, but pronounces betrays him. But the fact is that, oh, by the way, when Giulia was unavailable, he is rendered with the verb koilano. Giulia is cave. Giulia is empty, meaning Giulia is unavailable for service because she is in your home. We have read, the fascination with this piece is that we have read this thing in Plautus, in Terence, and in Menander 1,000 times. This is the plot of a comedy. A soldier detains his favorite courtesan or his favorite lover in his home because they have fallen in love, and they have to buy her out from her pimp. And hence all the devices, all the tricks the slave has to invent to procure the money to enfranchise the girl and let her marry the soldier. In this case, I think it's probably a little more prosaic. The soldier doesn't want to give back the girl because he wants her in his home, but the pimp begins to be a little nervous because, sorry, I have a business to conduct and you're making me lose money, so what are we going to do? Because if we go forward and you begin to complain, you may pay me whatever you want, but I snatch the girls away. After all, he is her legal proprietor, sadly. We do not hear the woman's voice, but sometimes I like to think that this was the strategy concocted by Antonius and Giulia together. Like Giulia saying, you know what, I don't really like the idea of going back to service. Why don't you keep me here? And he, who definitely fries for her and will do anything for her, kind of consents to the deal. But that's the problem. They are tantalizing. Papyri can be tantalizing. They tell you a story, but they conceal to you the ending and the context. So you can invent a lot of things from this piece, but never be sure that it is the truth. This is actually the voice of a woman from a Vindolanda tablet. You can find the volumes of the Vindolanda tablets online. There's a website hosting all the text and the photograph of them. These are the famous tablets found close to the Hadrian's Wall, where conditions of anoxia, lack of oxygen, preserved them very well in the basement of a building. Most of these tablets, which are called Vindolanda tablets because they were found close to the fort of Vindolanda, literally on Hadrian's Wall, and I'm speaking of here specifically, are concerned with the lives of the soldiers. So they are private letters among soldiers. They detail the provisions of beer, of bread, people coming from Germany and going. But there's one tablet, T-Vindo 2291, which is definitely written by a woman to another woman, and is the letter of Claudia Severa to her Lepidina. Greetings. On 11 September, sister, for the day of the celebration of my birthday, I give you a warm invitation to make sure that you come to us, to make the day more enjoyable for me by your arrival, if you are present. Give my greetings to your Cerealis, my Aelius and my little son, send him their greetings. I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to prosper and aid. And on the verso, you have the address to Sulpicia Lepidina, wife of Cerealis, from Severa. Now, many years ago I've been in Berkeley and I visited Alcatraz, the prison, a place full of American soldiers and policemen, of course. Now, Alcatraz, as every prison, has a warden, used to have a warden, and the warden had its own office in the prison. The warden had a wife, usually, and at Christmas they would hold a party for all the guards in Alcatraz and their wives and families. Fantasy, I am free to fantasize that this was the situation here. We have the wives of the centurions, which is kind of the upper class in Hadrian's Wall. Roman army is basically the authority in every place you find it, because they are the ones with weapons. They are the bullies of the situations. And their wives can enjoy some prosperity in that respect. This is very much the upper class polite invitation among two Roman women on the fringes of the empire. Okay, I wish that I could tell they were actually biological sisters, but you never know, because in Roman polite society, pater, filius, and frater are also employed towards people you are particularly affectionate with. Doesn't mean they were actually relatives. I mean, they would share a surname at least, like Vibia Matidia and Vibia Sabina, for instance, the wives of Hadrian and Antoninus. So let us assume that they are just very good friends, but they are definitely the wives of centurions, and this message is actually on a very mundane and happy occasion, a birthday party. Who knew that Romans had a thing for birthday parties? Well, we can definitely assume they did from this tablet, Dies Solemnis Natalis Meus. Claudia Severa is not playing it lightly, okay? The solemn day of my birthday. Of course, the letters contains the usual salutations. My husband says hi to your husband, my kids say hi to your kids. Fun fact in that respect, we can be sure, okay, we never are sure that the person who says is right in the papyrus actually wrote it. There's much illiteracy in the ancient world, and there's a guild of scribes and slaves who can write very well and will do it for a fee or for free. Writing in this social context is considered a menial activity, not the activity of an intellectual. Plinius the Elder never wrote the Naturalis Historia. He took notes on wooden tablets, and slaves copied down the notes on papyri rolls. But in this case, I think we have a very strong argument that Claudia Severa used her own hand on this tablet. Why? Because of this. The text is written on a very beautiful ancient Roman cursive, probably the work of a skilled scribe, but on the right corner of the tablet, this is the text, and this is the right corner of the tablet, where usually the salutations are, the hand is different. Markedly different, I say, because it is more uncertain, letters are a little more squeezy, ligatures are not that well done, and the grammar is a little more uncertain. Look at the Latin. Sperabo tesoror. Yeah, I'll wait for you, sister. And then, like, unexplained, unaccountably to the left. Vale soror anima mea. Okay. Ita valeam. I guess there's a comma here. Vale soror anima mea, comma, and so might I be well, and then carissima, and then et have. Like a bene vale would have been enough for that. But it seems that Claudia Severa wanted to overdo it by accumulating 3 different greeting formulae, one after the other. Speravo te soror, vale soror anima mea, ita valeam, carissima, carissima, oh, et have, by the way, and be well. That is a strong clue that Claudia Severa put her own hand on the letter. It is a custom in letters written by males in this period that the main text is written by a scribe, and the sender adds a personal subscription to testify to the authenticity of the document. That happens very much in official letters among soldiers. And now we know that it was also a custom for private people. Claudia Severa is not a soldier, she's the wife of a soldier, but probably in her own society, in her own world, it is expected to put a formula at the end of a letter to signify that it is really you. And she really loved Sulpicia Lepidina. I mean, or at least she wanted to show off that she loved her by insisting on the affectionate formula. Oh, that is fun. That's another tablet which concerns a delicate point, illegitimacy and birth. In Egypt, especially after the first penetration of Roman legions, you have a new layer of individuals, the Roman citizens, those who have served in the cohorts, auxiliary cohorts, and the sons and daughters of legionaries. They are legally Roman citizens living in Egypt, speaking not Latin, probably not even reading or writing in Latin. They are Greco-Egyptians, mostly generations of Greco-Egyptians serving in the legions. But for some details of their lives, they must resort to Latin language. For instance, testaments legally to be done in Latin, otherwise in Greek they would not be valuable, they would not be effective. Or birth certificates. When your son or daughter is a Roman citizen, you have to declare it to Alexandria. Problem is, if the son or daughter is legitimate, birth in wedlock, you do the professio in album, the declaration in the white tablet of Roman citizens in Alexandria. But there's also another device, the testatio, the witness, the testimonies, which you use if your kids are kind of out of wedlock or illegitimate. We have testationes from soldiers because they could not marry. So their kids were not legitimate Roman citizens. They were the kids of their concubine. They would hope to marry the concubine at the end of their career and legitimize everything. Sometimes they died before it. But in this case, and it is a single case, it's a woman declaring the illegitimacy of her own kids. Sempronia Gemella, under the guardianship of Caius Julius Saturninus, called to witness those who were about to affix their seals, that on the 12th day before the calends of April, just passed, she brought forth twin sons from uncertain father, and that these are named Marcus Sempronius Serapion and Marcus Sempronius Socratium, the sons of Spurius. And she said that she has employed these written testimonies for these reasons, because the Aean Censian and the Papian Popian laws forbid that illegitimate sons and daughters be registered in the public record. And then there's the date. The text is unambiguous. Enixem esse ex incerto patre, natos masculinos geminos, from uncertain father. Literally means I do not know who the father is. Oh, this is weird. Vocetari marci Sempronius spuri, and that gens spuria means that they do not belong to any gens. And then, of course, because alle sense et papia popea, spurios spuriasve in albo profiteri vetat. So, sorry, no professio in album. Then you have, of course, Actum Alexandria, Aegyptum, Tertio Calendas Maias. You have the dating, no problems here. But this, you know, kind of triggers us. Why does Sempronia Gemella so bluntly declares that she doesn't know the father? First thing that comes into mind, she actually does not know she was abused. Plautus and Terentius, the usual plot. She is coming back at night from a party. He is drunk and comes from another party, in darkness feels there's a woman, immediately rapes her, impregnates her and goes his own way. 10 years later, he finds out and marries her and adopts the kid, because it is his own kid. Which would give to this tablet a very dark nuance. Or a more light tone, she knew who the father was, but it was better not to declare it. Why? Well, first of all, if the father was a soldier, the kids would have been illegitimate as well. There would be no jus connubii for the soldier. But Sempronia Gemella, if she is definitely a Roman citizen, if she declares that she doesn't know the father, the kids are Roman citizens. I mean, they are sons of our Roman citizens as well. So if she doesn't say who the father is, maybe they are better off. Second option, the guy is a Greco-Egyptian, not a Roman citizen. Incidentally, Sempronia Gemella's neighbor in Karanis, the Egyptian village where this has been excavated, is called Socrates, and one of the kids is called Socration. Maybe this guy was the father of the kids, but if they had declared a non-Roman father, the kids would have been diminuto iure, non-Roman citizens. And maybe Sempronia Gemella was not really ready to have her kids born in a worse conditions that they might have been if the father was out of the picture. So maybe not a history of violence, but a history of pragmatism from a very smart woman from the Egyptian countryside. That said, it is a risky business of being the common law wife of a Roman soldier, because if he dies, you earn nothing, you inherit nothing, because you were nothing according to the law. We will see how. But then, of course, people could marry after all. Pier Islands 4612 and P Michigan 7434, again, not actually the voice of a woman, but very strongly the voice of her father, because this is a marriage agreement between two Roman citizens, the daughter of a Roman citizen and another Roman citizen. Probably sons and daughters of veterans did intermarry very often in Egypt. It was a way to preserve your privileges. After all, Roman citizens had a privileged condition in Roman Egypt. They paid less taxes, mostly. And they had definitely an enhanced position when it came of asking for justice or for, inheritance law. Daughter arrangements and testaments are, in this respect, very significant, because Roman citizens want very much to overdo it and to show off how rich they are, so they leave everything, a bit of everything, to everyone in the neighborhood in testaments, or in daughter arrangements, they give a bit of everything to the bride-to-be. The fun thing is that after the customary and mandatory formulae, which are expected in a Latin testament, the scribe doesn't really understand how is the Latin word for everything that the father is saying, and just transliterates it from Greek, everything else. You will see how. The first lines are what we expect from any marriage agreement. Caius Antistius Nomisianus, filiam suam virginem Zenarion, elege Giulia, quid maritandis ordinibus lata est liberorum procreandorum causa, e in matrimonio eam collocavit Marcus Petronius Servilius duxit uxorem, eique dotis dixit et dedit, ea omnia quae infrascripta sunt pro eadem suprascripta. So this guy knows the formulae, but also repeats them a bit. I mean, it wasn't really necessary to say, ea omnia quae infrascripta sunt pro eadem suprascripta. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. This is the dowry for Zenarion. The syntax is a little drunken. But again, this formula could be found in companions, and Egyptian lawyers definitely had access also to Latin companions when Roman citizens asked for their services, when their services were required. The dowry is magnificent. First of all, a lot of land. 2 jugera of Catoicic land, close to Vicus, close to the village of Philadelphia. Catoicic land is originally the land, cleruchic land, given to the veterans of Alexander's army by the Ptolemies. This was land specifically given to soldiers. And even in Roman Empire, this land maintained a special status. Then this sort of aminae paternae, which is probably sandy land, land from which you extract sand, and then again land where you cultivate wine, ampelitis. If you notice, there is no Latin word here, but transliteration of Greek words. Katoikikae, paternae, jugera, also a mismatch in inflection, in inflectional class. Amminae, amminos in Greek, katoikike, transliterated katoikika, and ampelitis, transliterated ampelitis. There are Latin words for all these three terms, yes, but the scribe didn't know them because he was a Greek-Egyptian and didn't know the language. Then, of course, gold, in aureis, it is subtitled in the dowry arrangements. And again, a bit of everything, not 2 earrings, just one. A very long earring. Again, he could have used the Latin word, but he just transliterated the Greek enotion in enotium. Oh, enotion, just a transliteration. And then again, these scottatia. What are these scottatia? We will never know, because there is no Greek equivalent. Probably he even heard particularly badly, which totals 4 tetarta in gold. Yeah, not bad. Claria in silver, 1 pair of silver claria. God help me, we do not know what the hell these claria were, but they weigh 7 statera, so we have something here to be spoken of. And clothes in veste aestumata, the value is expressed in money. You can begin to imagine this bride being very rich because her daddy got her a lot in terms of dowry, and of course clothes which she could expose while going around in the city. Tunics done in the Syrian way, rust reddish in color. Colored clothes are always more valuable than white clothes. And then again this eratianon, transliterated heratianon, who knows what this is, a garment connected to Hera, and a striped garment, once again, the Greek word epicarsion is transliterated epicarsium in Latin. The scribe really has no clue on how to nominate this object in Latin, so he has every time to transliterate. Bronze, after the clothes, we see you are going to less and less value. Land, gold, silver, clothes, bronze. But we have a lot of bronze, because of course bronze is less worthy, so we can spend freely in it. And it's basically everyday object, a small statue of Venus, a small jar, a mirror, a chest, 2 caskets, another small jar. Arca is the Latin word for chest. Okay, we can do that, but again, caskets lechithoe. Aesop transliterated osiptrum, but they knew speculum, but no, they didn't. Cadium transliterates cadion again. Everyday objects for the bride, and then again, wood, because we are going down the scale. A wooden chest, and here's the Latin is correct, arcula lignea. But all the rest, cophinos, pyxis, cathedra, they are all transliterated. Cathedra, pyxis, cophinus. These objects are definitely everyday objects that the bride can use to store cosmetics, to sit, to hold things in. Perhaps gold and silver are less things that you do not bring about so easily, especially a single earring. Don't they come in pair? And at the end of it, the least valuable object of everything, because evidently there was abundance of it, people. The she-slave belonging to her father. Don't forget that in the Greco-Roman world, the slaves are objects. They can be sold, they can be purchased, they can be lent, they can be tortured to death, at least in Republican times, especially if they were interrogated in a process. Then it became illegal, but at the beginning they were just another object. They could be put in testaments as valuable objects, and in doubtful arrangements, that too. Once again, you can imagine a nice story like this was kind of not the nurse of the girl, but probably a she-slave that had taught her, maybe an older friend to the young girl, who goes with her she-master, with her mistress, in the moment the mistress gets married. Think of Gone with the Wind. Scarlett O'Hara and Mammy. Mammy used to be a slave in Scarlett O'Hara's family. She was a property of the O'Hara family. After the liberation of the slaves, she sticks to Scarlett because, after all, she is very much of a mother figure to Scarlett, an affectionate figure to her, especially after Mrs. O'Hara dies of typhus. But we need to see, to describe, we really need to send a scribe to a Latin lesson, because, it was, herai seraidos in Greek, cool. Either you do heraidem, the correct transliteration in Latin, or if you really want to inflect heraida, heraide, at least put the accusative in the right way. No, he really makes a complete mess of it with heraidan, which means nothing. And after all, the collaterals, the objects that could be given back if, or that could be sold in money if the bride did need any money. Parapherna, specifically. Fernet is the dowry, parapherna is collateral objects, and it's basically vestiments, clothes. A cloth that is specifically described as worn out, tribacum, once again the Greek word tribakon, transliterated tribakun, because, I mean, it's not, I didn't ruin it, it was worn out when I received it. That's basically a guarantee clausula. That's basically a guarantee formula if you give back the object in a bad state. And of course, Servilius made the donatio ante nuptias. Unfortunately, the papyrus breaks up. But gives us a glimpse, and an interesting glimpse, in two well-to-do Egyptian families. This is evidently the right way to send off a daughter to marriage, by providing her with a lot of money, both in disposable items and in actual valuable items. It's not impossible to suppose that most of this dowry would have been administered by the groom rather than by the bride, especially land. The bridegroom was probably very anxious to get his hands on land, to invest in that land. Marriages, by the way, can also end. Pinich 7442 details the evidence of a divorce. Apparently an amicable divorce, actually. Demetria, age 38, is certifying something concerning Gemellus. Gemellus is a soldier, is a marine, actually, of the classis Augusta Alexandrina, aboard the warship Draco. Now, and I don't know if you ever wanted to serve on a Greek or Roman ship, or a ship from the Roman fleet. I would feel very protected by the fact that my ship is called Dragon, but that's only my opinion, of course. The document is mysterious, it breaks exactly when we begin to understand what it is about, but it is plain from the grammar and from the text that Demetria and Gemellus are no longer married. Demetria is a divorcee. If you do not have religion in the way, marriage and divorce, after all, are just the stuff of everyday bureaucracy. There is nothing sacred to be broken. Marriages are contracted and dissolved as long as it is convenient for them to be. Think of how many times Roman aristocrats in late Republic married. 3 or 4 times. It depends on how fast the political turmoil brought them. By the way, we are no longer in Egypt. This is plainly Mauretania Caesariensis. Demetria, daughter of, dwelling in Colonia Caesarea, 39 years old, of dark complexion, long face, straight nose, and with lentil-shaped mark on her right cheek. They have no photographs, guys. They have to recognize each other. Under the guardianship of Glaucippus, son of Antonianus, dwelling in Colonia Caesarea, 48 years old, of dark complexion, long face, straight nose, rather bald. I felt particularly offended when I read that. Subcalvus. Yeah, what are you looking to my head? Please don't do that. And with a scar above the left eyebrow, perhaps the result of a brawl in a bar. To Gaius Valerius Gemellus, a soldier of the Augustan Alexandrian fleet and of the warship Drake, to whom she was previously married, from which marriage there were born sons, Justus, 14 years old, and Gemellus, 10 years old, and to him she promised and gave as her dowry clothing by valuation and on the spot in the form of cash, which dowry the said Valerius Gemellus acknowledged. And who knows? But the text, you see, is very plain. Consistens coloniae Caesareae, dwelling in the colonia of Caesarea of Mauretania, annorum triginta et novem, tutore auctore Glaucippo, probably, who knows, perhaps a relative, perhaps her father, perhaps her uncle, and then the point that is interesting to us. Oh, by the way, facie deducta, long face, naso recto, probably like my nose, very straight nose, and then subcalvo, and cicatrice super supercilium sinistrum. I also am very triggered by that corpore fusco of dark complexions. If they are not Egyptians, they are anyway North Africans. And then the part that is interesting to us, cui ante nupta erat. That is unmistakable. That is, with whom she had been married, but now she no longer is married. Ex quo matrimonio, filius procreaverunt, etc., etc. Now, opinions on this thing have been very different. Sanders and Claire Preot thought of a marriage contract. Demetria and Gemellus, they had been in a gamos agraphos, but he was dismissed honorably from the navy, and now they can legalize the marriage. Problem is, Gemellus is not a veteran. Gemellus is a miles classis Augusti Alexandrine, so sorry, he is still a soldier in active service. Maybe it's a contract for a dowry that was vengered in 1941. Gemellus is acknowledging the receipt of a dowry years after they had been married. A contract of betrothal, Gemellus and Demetria's marriage is dissolved because he enlists in the Alexandrian fleet, but to promise that they will remarry when Gemellus will be dismissed from active service, and it's also a reminder that the sons, Justus and Gemellus, were legitimate. Actually, I kind of agree with Aranjo Ruiz and Berger here. The transaction is unspecified. We do not really know that. But the necessary premise of the transaction is a divorce. The two are no longer married. And the point is that Gemellus acknowledges that he has given back to Demetria the dowry. Demetria needs from Gemellus the acknowledgement that he has given back the dowry, probably for another transaction which is obscure to us. But the marriage was amicably, we hope, terminated. So, no prison actually. This is just everyday business for a Roman woman, even divorce. Still in Africa, this time we are in Carthage. Once again, this is an ostracon. Unfortunately, since it's an ostracon coming from Tunisia, there has been turmoil in that country. We no longer know where those ostraca are. We have a few photographs from Marechal's archive, because he studied them when he came to Libya for the ostraca of Bungem. And this definitely mention, a woman is the sender, and this definitely mention business to her own. Like a Roman woman having business. You can see that the text is particularly tortured. The translation is very uncertain, but at least, I mean, Ronia cannot be but a woman. From to my brother Valerio, that is nice, B and V are mixed, salutem, and then again she mentions peculiarem meum, my property, septenarias orcas vini, 7 measure orcas of wine for me, and then a final salutation, Opt te omnes frater tui bene valere. Again, she is also annoyed about something that Nemesianus couldn't really help her with. Quatenos Nemesianus non potuit mi in aiutoriu esse. Look at this very African Latin. No consonants, the syntax is gone awry, especially the orthography is a little weird. But this is definitely a woman managing her own affairs. This is from Carthage, 3rd century rather, but if you go to papyri in Egypt, Egyptian papyri, women dealing with the dead husband's estate or company are the stuff of everyday life. Again, are very common. A businesswoman in Egyptian papyri is not a common occurrence, but definitely an attested one. And of course, women could also be liberated slaves. This is a tablet from 3rd century, a wax tablet containing a manumissio inter amicos, the enfranchisement or liberation among friends, of a she-slave near Hermopolis. The procedure was known to Roman law as one of the many procedures available for liberating a slave. We do not know why it was so popular in Egypt, but it happened more than once. We have testimonies from the tablets. The funny thing is that all the instances we have from Egypt concern female slaves, and all of them are older than 30, which kind of puzzles us, right? Si Marcus Aurelius Ammonium, Lupergus, Arapionix, ex matre Tereuta, e Abermupoli Maiore Antiqua e Splendida, Helene in Ancillam suam vernam, houseboard slave, Annorum circiter triginta et quattuor, inter amicus manumisit liberamque esse iussit. Text again is pretty clear. Has bidden her to be free and has received for her freedom from Aurelius Ales 2,200 Augustal drachmas, which Ales, son of Inarus, has himself made a present of to Helene, the above-named free woman. Don't be surprised of that circiter triginta et quattuor, about 34 years old. The exact date of birth is only recorded when there is someone around you who loves you. If you are a she slave born in a house, probably no one really cares about your birthday. So no one really knows exactly how old are you, because no one knows your birth date. No one cares. It's not like Claudia Severa, who knows very well when her birthday is. This poor woman, she doesn't even know how old is she. Yeah, perhaps 34, more or less. My colleague Michele Pedone, who has studied, I'm sorry for the Italian text, but he has written this article in Italian, has concluded that the idea of dismissing the she-slaves beyond they were 30 years old was a matter of pragmatism from the master. Because every kid that a slave produces is a slave of the master. So if I dismiss you after you're 30, it's less likely that you produce a son or a daughter which will not belong to me. If I release you after your reproductive bloom is ended, I have in fact taken advantage of your reproductive years. Secondly, if you don't have kids after your 30s, after you have liberated to you, you cannot enter Roman citizenship. You can only have union citizens, which means that if you die, all your peculium comes to me, your former master. So the idea of dismissing the slaves after a certain age was basically a strategy to keep a hand on everything valuable that it could produce. Kids, because they were your slaves, and their own money, which would have come to you after they died childless. But they were not defenseless in their legal proceedings, in their legal probations. You may know that in Roman law, they acknowledged 3 cases of infirmitas, of weakness. One more than we have. We have the infirmitas mentis. Crazy people need a guardian. We have the infirmitas aetatis. Minors need guardians. If you are younger than 18, you have a legal guardian. But they had a third infirmitas which we no longer have, the infirmitas sexus. Women need a guardian because they have some sort of intrinsic weakness in Roman law that require them to be assisted by a male guardian. But in the moment a woman has a recognized guardian, is fully functional legally and can do whatever she wants, provided she puts in the document tutore auctore and then the ablative of the guy. Remember tutore auctore Glaucippo Antoniani, tutore auctore Gemello, etc., etc. In the moment you have a guardian, you are free to act. And by the way, with the Ius Trium Liberorum by Augustus, if you have 3 living male sons, you do not need a guardian. And you are, again, fully free to operate on a legal ground. Greco-Egyptian women must have taken advantage from these proceedings because it allowed them more liberty, more freedom than the corresponding norm in Greco-Egyptian law, and we have several instances of Greco-Egyptian women asking for a guardian to the prefect of Egypt. The phrasing is the same, Medio Onoraziano, Caio Valerio Firmo prefecto Egipti, ab Aurelia Monario, ab Aurelia Diodora, ab Aurelia Arsinoe, rogo domine des mihi tutorem auctorem, elege Iulia et Titia, et ex senatus consulto. Look at that, they point out the name. This is like an application for a job where you already know who you're going to take. Could you please give me that guy as a guardian? Or just choose for me. No, I already know who he is. Can I have him as a guardian who could be like their brother, their husband, their father, a male they could control? Why not? I'm optimistic about that. This is the Latin portion, which is very short and very technical. Then it is usually followed by a long summary in Greek, because of course these people do not read Latin and do not write it, but they can sometimes be literate in Greek. The prefect invariably grants the guardian to the petitioner, so it was probably not a big deal. It's always fun to see the very short Latin part in the upper part of the papyrus compared to the Greek portion, which is way longer, of course, because it is very much more detailed. And then, of course, the division in these papyrus specifically describe at the center of the text as written Hermeneia ton Romaicon, translation of the Latin part, because, I mean, who can read Latin in this country? Certainly not you. And my final item for you, the passport. Because apparently traveling in the Roman Empire required a permit of some sort. At least I learned it from Papyri, didn't know that. This is the earliest known instance of, we may call it, stretching borders of passport, more or less, and has been released to a woman by the prefect of Egypt, a woman who is apparently traveling by herself, by her own. This is Aurelia Maiciana, or Marciana, I am unsure about the letter there, who must return to her own town, which is in Pamphylia, but she's sailing from Egypt. And if you sail from Egypt, you must step by the island of Pharos, which is basically the portorium, the place where you leave Egypt for good and commit yourself to the open sea. So you make a request to the prefect of Egypt. The prefect of Egypt gives back the request to Aurelia Maiciana with orders from the procurator Fari, who will leave her sail. The original part is in Greek, the request is made in Greek to the prefect of Egypt, but the prefect of Egypt answered the request by forwarding it to the procurator Fari in Latin. We are inside the Roman bureaucracy after all, and probably the two individuals are from the West. Who knows? Aurelia Marciana says, Valerio firmo e parco Egyptu para Aurelias Marcianes Sidetidos, so we know she's from Side. Bulo mai curie ec pleus ei diafarum, very simply. Axiograpsai seto epitropotes faru, apollius ei me catatoethos. Year the third, first A of the Epagomenai, Dieuduce, very well. I ask you to write to the procurator of Pharos that he leaves me go according to custom. And downstairs, Valerius Firmus, Asclepiade, who is the procurator of Pharis Salutem, dimitti iusi de Pharo, I have ordered that this person should be sent off from Pharos, commendo tibi, I trust you with the matter. Vale, iusi, the Latin is a little weird, and then you have the Latin dating formula, datum, calendus octobres, and the consulship. It's a long journey. Side is in Pamphylia, which is literally here. And if you want to go there by ship from Egypt, well, if you make coastal navigation, that would probably be your course. I do not really know how many days you would employ. It is said 9 or 10 days from Alexandria to Rome if the winds support your effort. But in this case, and it is unfortunate because we do not really know who Maiciana was traveling with. But it is evident that by requesting a travel permit to the prefect of Egypt did not require her to mention any male relative or any male guardian. She was supposed to ask this in her own person. She did not need any authorization, and Valerius Firmus mentions no further authorization. He just says to Asclepiades, I've given my permission, let her go. It doesn't look like Aurelia Meciana is some sort of aristocrat or member of the royal family or whatever, just an expat. Still, that certifies, like the women who asked for a tutor, like the women who were liberated as slaves, some degree of independence of these people, beyond or beneath the lines of Greek and Roman law, which would have been prohibitive for them during all their lives. And by these documents, I hope I have shown you a piece of this world that you didn't know about. Thank you very much for bearing with me for the second time.